And the scanner is held about 2 feet away from the body, run over the body, and wherever the body has any illness or any dysfunction or infection or toxin, there's a bluish light in the middle of the room, about a foot away from the body, that appears in the air, and then this device is held there until the bluish light disappears. I've personally observed treatments of terminal cancer. Terminal cancer takes about 10 sessions. Lyme disease takes about 6 sessions, and everything else takes less. The session is about 20 minutes. It's done every other day. These instruments are already out there, so we're already living in this time. It's not like something that's going to, and this is approved by the German authorities, by the German equivalent of the FDA.
So this treatment, you observed this treatment in Germany or the U.S.?
I observed it in Germany.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it will not be allowed here in the U.S. Okay. Not for a while. But what I'm saying is other countries, where the application of energy medicine is already in full swing, approved by the authorities there, and there's an increasing number of practitioners turning towards those tools. In America, with a master's in biochemistry, there's no other country, I think, that has that much knowledge and that's much accumulated knowledge and science in biochemistry as the U.S. has. But we also got stuck in that, forgetting to look over the rim of our bowl and seeing there's a whole other types of medicine practice in other countries, and they are becoming increasingly effective. I'm not exaggerating. I saw interviewed in the waiting room of 2 physicians that use this Russian equipment. I interviewed 20 patients that had terminal cancer when they entered the treatment, and 18 of them were considered cured. This weren't 5-year cures, but they were cures several months after the treatment. They had all the MRI scans done, all the cancer markers done, and was absolutely clean bodies, completely negative after just a few treatments. We've never seen anything like that here. So yes, energy medicine is coming, and it's maybe not coming in the U.S. Very fast because we have so many special interest groups here. And as you know, the FDA has become a policing arm for the pharmaceutical industry, repressing any other method or tool that comes along in very vicious and violent ways. But, the rest of the world, as it is moving ahead, there is international competition, and eventually we're going to be forced to open up to energy medicine, whether we want to or not.
Well, I sure hope so. But it would seem to me that the expertise that the United States has achieved in biochemistry isn't necessarily a result of a prejudice or a bias, but collectively, we've got about a half a dozen multinational corporations of these drug companies that are earning corporate profits that are well in excess of $500 billion a year. There's $600 billion they're earning every year, and that provides a lot of influence. And politically and in the medical professions, and we're both familiar with that, and certainly many of the listeners are. So I guess part of the question relates to on a pragmatic level, this type of opposition from the self-interest of the drug companies. What type of restriction or barriers or opposition do you perceive would limit that, and do you see that happening in the next few years or 10 years, 20 years, even in our lifetime? Or do you think that their opposition can be effective to prevent that, or that these therapies and old options that do exist today, as you reference, are going to be so compelling that when they're adopted in other countries, the U.S. isn't going to have a choice?
There's 2 aspects. One aspect that I'm personally aware of in a rather painful way is that there was an attorney firm hired here on behalf of Big Pharma to go after energy medicine in the U.S. and is one of their key pieces to create a lot of intimidation in this field. They arrested in jail last year a 71-year-old couple here in Seattle that were helping people by treating them with the Rife technology. And so it sent a shockwave through the community. And so those attempts are certainly there. But on the other hand, the same pharmaceutical industry is now patenting those frequencies that these people are using to heal people and finding out what works, what doesn't work, preparing themselves for the next phase and evolution of medicine, which will be largely frequency-based, that, we will have a frequency and instruments that will treat a throat strap infection with specific frequencies that kill the bugs, through frequencies. Just like we use UV light to disinfect a room. There's a certain frequency that kills certain bugs, staph, to sterilize a room. And we can use frequencies in other ways to eliminate bugs, toxins, and other things in the body, but also to turn on genes, turn off genes. That will all be coming, and there just will be enough international pressure that we in the U.S. will also move along with that, when the time comes, when there's too much success on the other side. It's the same like with the car industry. Just to give that example, sort of the car industry in the U.S. was completely asleep, for decades, until the Japanese cars and the German cars were taking it all over. And then somebody in there made the decision, okay, now let's catch up and build decent cars for these people also. And there was just always that lag time. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be the same. It's going to be the same in our field. And hopefully Big Pharma is not going to be too vicious to us small people here that are pioneering sort of the way out of the use of pharmaceuticals into the field of using physics rather than biochemistry, not for everything, but for a lot of applications.
Sure. Well, it's interesting and exciting to see that come in, and our site and your work certainly is helping accelerate and catalyze that process. But one of the reasons I started the site is to decrease that lag time between the incidents, the time that is actually learned and discovered by the researchers or the clinicians, and widely adopted or accepted by the traditional medical community, to decrease that time from decades down to years or months even. And I think we've been successful in many cases, but certainly we've got a long way to go. Now, the benefit of I guess learning this material is that you don't have to wait until it's widely adopted. Right now I think we're in the Schopenhauer has those principles. He was a German philosopher from a few hundred years ago, of course, that said that that says all truth goes through three different stages. First, it's
violently opposed.
Well, that's the second stage, but the second stage is violently opposed, and then it's widely adopted as truth. So we're probably in the second stage now. As first stage is ridiculed, and then it becomes violently opposed, and we're in the opposition stage at this point. But eventually will be. I think truth inevitably will come to the surface, and that's what we're doing. But the point of this comment is that if you're a clinician or if you're a patient, you could find a clinician, encourage them to start exploring these energy diagnostic modalities, because I love traditional objective diagnostic testing. It does help us. I mean, I use blood tests all the time. I mean, it's a really solid test, and it's not an either or. I mean, I've taken friends to your clinic, and you do both of the things. It's not just use one or the other. Use both, but to not utilize the energetic diagnostic component, and for everyone listening, we've been doing this in our clinic for over a dozen years. I mean, any patient who comes to our clinic, we use this energy diagnostic intervention, and you could use it with instruments. We happen to use Dr. Klingkhardt's autonomic response testing, or ART, because we found it to be consistently useful and help us identify areas and issues and prioritize things, because you could have a dozen things going wrong with you, but if you don't know the sequence and the order to address it, I mean, do you take out your mercury fillings first? Do you address the wheat allergy? Do you address some lead toxicity? So these are all things that you can prioritize with energy diagnostics. And I guess the point is to encourage people to explore these, and certainly to consider your system as a way. I mean, it's certainly going to take some time, effort, and energy for them to fly out to Seattle or to Germany if they wanted to take the course there and learn this. But it's going to be less expensive than some of these machine instruments, which cost over $10,000, $20,000 in some cases.